to Impact OC, the only program showcasing the people and organizations shaping Orange County. With your host, Don Camber.
Hit the wrong switch.
Hello, live from the OC Talk Radio studios at UCI's Beal Applied Innovation Center. I'm OC Talk Radio Public Affairs Director Don Camber with another great guest positively impacting our community. Today I welcome Flying Leatherneck Historical Foundation President and CEO Brigadier General Michael J. Aguilar. He had a 31-year Marine Corps career holding a variety of flying and command billets. He's accumulated over 4,000 hours in fixed-wing helicopters, primarily as an attack helicopter pilot. He's here to discuss his mission to return the Flying Leatherneck Aviation Museum to its original home, the Great Park in Irvine. Thank you, Brigadier General Aguilar, for being on Impact OC.
Don, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Please explain your goal to bring the museum back to the Great Park in Irvine, formerly the El Toro Marine Corps Air Station, and what's being done to make it happen.
Well, we have a great partnership, a private-public partnership between the city of Irvine, the Marine Corps, and the Flying Leatherneck Historical Foundation. The museum, which we are in the process of relocating from Marine Corps Air Station Miramar back to El Toro, now called Great Park, where the museum started in 1989. So the museum's roots in history began all right here at Marine Corps Air Station El Toro in Orange County. So we're in the process now of bringing it back home to its original startup place.
So explain the historical significance of those planes.
So the museum itself is an aviation museum that represents all the aircraft that the Marine Corps flew, primarily from World War II on. And it's a museum that honors the history and legacy of Marine Corps aviation and those that served in the Marine Corps aviation throughout the history of Marine Corps aviation, which started in 1912. In addition to honoring the history and legacy of Marine Corps aviation and those that served, it also recognizes the contribution that Marine Corps aviation made to the development of Orange County with Marine Corps Air Station El Toro and Marine Corps Air Station Tustin, the helicopter air station that was located in Tustin. So that's really the mission of the museum, honoring that history and legacy and the contributions to the growth of Orange County. Additionally, and more importantly, our mission is to focus on tomorrow's youth, our leadership of tomorrow, by inspiring them with our displays and, of course, recognition of the history of Marine Corps aviation. We want to inspire them to consider pursuing the STEM disciplines: science, technology, engineering, and math. The disciplines that we believe are so important to maintaining our position, our global position in the world. So we believe these displays, these exhibits will stimulate interest, and that's our mission. Again, history of Marine Corps aviation, contributions to Orange County, and stimulating our youth in the science, technology, and engineering and math disciplines.
So these displays were at the former El Toro Marine Corps Air Station, and then they went to Miramar, and now you're trying to bring them back where they technically started.
Exactly. So the museum started at El Toro in 1989. The commanding general at that time, Brigadier General Dave Shooter, had an idea that he wanted to start a museum. So he reached out to a lot of retired Marines here in Orange County who had served at the air stations Tustin or El Toro with the idea of starting a Marine museum. So they started a foundation, and the foundation started to grow. Working with the Marine Corps, they were able, during that time period, shortly after starting in 1989, to have the Marine Corps recognize it as what we call a command museum. So it was recognized by the Marine Corps as a museum. Unfortunately, in 1999, as part of BRAC, along with the air stations El Toro and Tustin, the museum was relocated to Marine Corps Air Station Miramar down in San Diego. A lot of people are familiar with Miramar as Top Gun, the home of Top Gun.
And they have air shows.
And, of course, the air shows. But actually, the air station in San Diego started as a Marine Corps air station during World War II. So the Marines were going back to their original air station down in San Diego. For the next 21 years, 1999 through 2021, the museum, which was a command museum, operated out of Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. Unfortunately, in 2021, the command museum, and let me take a step back, although it was recognized by the Marine Corps as a designated command museum, the Marine Corps provided no appropriated funds for it. The operational overhead for the museum came out of the operational budget of the commanding officer for the air station. So in 2021, the commanding officer, with the budget constraints, just realized he could no longer afford to operate the museum at Miramar and decided to close it. The foundation, being informed of that, then made overtures and entered discussions with the Marine Corps to try to save it as a private museum on Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. For a variety of reasons, we were unable to reach an agreement with the Marine Corps to maintain the museum as a privately run museum at Miramar. But fortunately for us, during our discussions, we were contacted by the city of Irvine, who was just re-engaging with their plans for Great Park and recognizing the historical contributions and significance of the museum. And the Marine Corps contacted the foundation and asked if we would be willing to enter discussions with them to help relocate the museum. So those discussions resulted in an agreement between the city, the Marine Corps, and the foundation, captured in a memorandum of understanding to develop plans for the relocation of the museum back to Irvine. We've made great deal of headway over since 2021, the last couple of years here. From the MOU, we are now ready to start the relocation process. We just finalized an agreement with the city for some storage, which I'll talk about in a second. And fortunately for us, the city has granted or authorized $20 million towards the building of a new museum facility. That, on top of our fundraising efforts that have been ongoing for the last 2 years, have allowed us now to approach the Marine Corps and let them know that we're ready to start an agreement, finalize an agreement that will loan the 40 aircraft and all the other micro artifacts, there's engines, ground support equipment, all those things that you can think of are necessary to support Marine Corps aviation are part of the museum collection. So in addition to the 40 aircraft and all the other associated artifacts, we are now in the process of finalizing an agreement that will allow the foundation to take temporary custody on loan of the entire collection and then move that collection up to Irvine. Our original plan was to house the museum in one of the old World War II hangars. For people, your audience, that might be familiar with the old KC-130 Raider Country hangar, there are two large hangars, sister hangars, number 296 and 297. We just refer to them as 296, 297. Originally, the plan was the museum would be housed in 296, but for some financial concerns, the city decided not to go forward with the refurbishment and instead offered to, again, help fund the erection of a brand new facility. So our plans right now have changed a little bit. Originally, we were going to house the museum in Hangar 296. We are now in the process of finalizing plans for the design and construction of the new museum, finalizing the agreement with the Marine Corps for the loan of the aircraft to the foundation, and we will, by the end of this year, hope to move all the aircraft and all the artifacts up to Irvine, where they will be stored in the sister hangar 297, where we'll perform much needed restoration and conservation of the aircraft and store the other artifacts while we move forward with the building of the new facility, which will be right there at Great Park. So there's a lot of balls in the air, a lot of planning going on, but it's a great private-public partnership with a great deal of support from the Irvine City Council and the public, a lot of retired individuals. We've reached out to the community around Great Park. We have a great deal of support from the community there. So we're excited about the plans we have in place and eventually moving the museum back up to Irvine. Again, it will start with the movement at the end of this year for storage, and we'll perform restoration and conservation while we build the museum, which we hope to open the doors in late 2025 or early 2026.
Whereabouts on the Great Park will this be?
So for your listeners, they may be familiar, the City Council has moved forward with a wonderful plan they call the Great Park Framework. And they just recently earlier this year, approved, I believe, $720 million for the development of the former Marine Corps Air Station El Toro. So from the south end of runway 34, which is oriented north and south, but the south end of that runway 34 all the way to the north end will be built out by the city. Our museum will be on the south end, the approach end of what used to be runway 34, in an area they call the Cultural Terrace. The larger Cultural Terrace won't be completely built out, but a smaller portion, I believe around 38 acres, will house the museum in what they call the Cultural Terrace West. In addition to that, our museum, there'll be two other entities there, the Orange County Theater and Dance and the Pretend City. So they'll be our neighbors. So within this Cultural Terrace West, we hope to develop exactly that, a cultural terrace that has history, the arts, and entertainment, all located in a very small area as part the next enhancement to the Great Park Framework. And that larger Great Park Framework plan will be built out in the out years, again, from the southern end of the runway all the way to the north, where they'll have the botanical garden, the memorial park, and then in between the amphitheater, I believe they're also putting in a swimming facility of some sort. So it's a great plan. I would really encourage your listeners to look at the Irvine plans for the Great Park, and we'll be part of that. And we're hoping to be the centerpiece of the arts and entertainment section in the Cultural Terrace West.
And again, it's looking to open late next year?
Late 2025, early 2026. And we've got
That's
some
right.
time, yeah. We'll have a couple of years where we'll be working on the aircraft. They've been, for the last 21 years, the display at Miramar was all outside. It was a very small facility. None of the aircraft were indoors. So they've been all exposed to the Southern California environment for 21 years. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on them, and we're very excited about that opportunity and being able to take them outside into this very large hangar. It's called Raider Country, and we'll do all our storage there in our facility. We'll do maintenance and conservation on the aircraft.
Describe the building that you anticipate that will house this
Oh,
museum.
it's a beautiful facility. We are very fortunate to have partnered with a local firm, Sightline Productions. They're a great group, and they do design and productions, and so they have wonderful concepts for the displays and exhibits that we plan, again, that are going to be very multi-generational. The plans, and what really excites me about working with Sightline, they didn't want to have just an old stuffy museum where a bunch of old Marines can go look at these old aircraft and artifacts. Well, they wanted to have, again, a very multi-generational sort of experience that will include interactive AR, IR displays that will have some immersive type of things. So we're really very excited about their ideas. Again, it's Sightline Productions here in Mira Mesa we're working with, and they've just come up with some great plans. In fact, if I may, let me describe a couple of them to let you know how exciting it is. So in addition to having a bunch of aircraft and telling the stories of the history of those aircraft, we'll also have technology that will allow our visitors with their iPhone just to hold it up to the side of the aircraft, and they'll actually be able to see the mechanical workings of the engines and be able to experience from the pilot's perspective in the cockpit what it's going to look like. So we're hoping that will stimulate, again, for youth, excitement about how does all that stuff work, as one example. Another example of how of what we want to do is talk about the technology and science behind an ejection seat. We have a bunch of ejection seats that we want to have on display. So we not only want to talk about the engineering, the mechanics of an ejection sequence, but then what happens to the body once it ejects. So as part of this display, and it's all very interactive, you'll be able to see, not experience, but able to see what impact ejection might have on the human body going at 300, 400 knots as the pilot ejects. So it goes from the engineering, the mechanics, the sequencing of that ejection to the impact, the physiological impact on the body, to the next one. Once you're on the ground, what do? Well, there's no GPS in a combat zone, probably. You probably don't have your phone. So you have to read a map. So as a follow-on to that ejection display, after we talk about the physiological impact on the body, you're on the ground with limited resources to escape and evade, including a map. And so we're going to have, as the part of that display is, you'll be able to select the period that you may be involved in, the type of aircraft you flew in, and then you'll select the survival equipment you have, including the map. And you'll have to figure out how to read that map, not a GPS, not on your iPhone, to get back to a safe spot. So those are the kind of ideas we have for our displays beyond just the information and history of the aircraft. But to the history part, we have a couple of artifacts that I think are very significant. We have a CH-46 helicopter, which is a tandem type helicopter. For those in the Army, it's called a Chinook, CH-47. Ours is a smaller version, Sea Stallion, called a CH-46 aircraft. Every squadron has a call sign. Every pilot has a call sign. Well, every squadron also has their own call sign. So when they're flying around, and the controller knows who's flying, what aircraft, what squadron they belong to. So we have an aircraft which was part of HMM 165, that was the squadron, and their call sign was Lady Ace. And this aircraft was Lady Ace 09, that was the side number of the aircraft. It's the actual helicopter that flew the American ambassador and the American flag out of Vietnam. So it's a very historical aircraft that we have on display. What's really exciting about this display that we have, the lead designer at Sightline, Viet, is a Vietnamese refugee. And he distinctly recalls the evacuation and the events that took place during that Vietnam, when we pulled out of Vietnam. So it's kind of a full circle here. Here, the aircraft that flew the American ambassador out of Vietnam and the American flag, we actually have a Vietnamese individual who escaped Vietnam during that time, and he vividly recalls, and he's designing that display. So there's really some exciting stories that we think we can bring to this museum beyond just the museum displays themselves.
Will there be some videos of interviews with people who actually participated in those operations? Actually,
the answer to that is yes, absolutely. In fact, we have just signed a memorandum of understanding with Cal State Fullerton, who came to our attention recently that they have a very robust oral history program with the military here, the Marines, at El Toro. So we have partnered with them, and we want to make part of the museum experience, part of the learning experience, all those oral histories that they have recorded. So we're excited about moving forward with them. Also, one of our displays will be similar to what your guests may have seen if they've had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and visit the World War II Memorial. They have those pods, memorial pods, where you can look up family members or record information about family members. We'll have what we call memory pods that will, again, that oral history that Cal State Fullerton has probably will be part of that exhibit. And we're hoping to be able to have a opportunity for our visitors to look up their families that may have served in the military. Another important part of our museum, which we recognize and will be part of it, is that it's not only about the men and women who served in Marine Corps aviation, but just think of the impact of all the civilians had that worked at those two air stations, Tustin's and El Toro. So they still live here in Orange County, a great number of them. Maybe the kids who had an opportunity because their parents were civilians employed by the Marine Corps, they'll be able to come and see where their parents worked, what they were involved in, and they're part of this experience also. So this is going to be something special, I think, for Orange County.
Well, you've flown many helicopters.
I've primarily in the H-1 helicopters, the Cobra helicopter, and I started out in Huey helicopters, but those are the two that I had my primary time in. I did have an opportunity on deployments and other events to jump into some other helicopters, the 53, CH-53 and CH-46. I will admit to all my Marine Corps friends, I cannot taxi a CH-46. It's the hardest darn thing to taxi. It's on wheels, and because it's a tandem rotor, I still can't figure out how they move that thing across the ground. But yeah, I have had the opportunity to fly another aircraft.
What's it like? Can you kind of describe it?
Well, for me, it really was a boyhood dream. Early on, because my father was a veteran of World War II, he flew in B-26s. And he would tell the stories, the adventurous stories. War is horrible, I can assure you of that. But like any person who served in the military, there were, whether in war and peace, there were fun times and hard times. So he shared with us a great deal about his good times for the most part. And that inspired me to want to pursue a career in the military. In fact, in the 7th grade, I approached my parents and said, I would like to go to a, believe it or not, a parochial all-boys high school because he had a good relationship with the Air Force Academy. And I naturally thought that if I want to be a military pilot, that's where I would need to go. Well, as it turns out, I didn't make it to the Air Force Academy, ended up here at Long Beach State. And one day I was, I think it was during the spring, I think I was supposed to be going to class and somehow got a little diverted during that beautiful spring day. But this was in 1969, and the Marine Corps recruiters were there. So here were the recruiters in their blues, looking sharp, still wanting to pursue a career in the military. I walked up to the Marine recruiter, and I had been raised on the World War II movies, the Flying Leathernecks with John Wayne, 12 O'Clock High with Gregory Peck, any number of movies. But I knew the Marines flew, but I had to ask the dumb college kid question, do you guys fly? And they said, absolutely. So they took me, they had a room set up where they do an initial aptitude test that they said I did well, but the flight aptitude test was 4 hours, and I'd have to schedule an appointment down in Los Angeles. So anyway, making a long story short or longer, I went to Los Angeles, took the flight aptitude test for flight school. They gave me $1.50 and said, go get lunch and come back in an hour and we'll let you know if you qualify. So went and had lunch, came back. They said scores were very, very good and that I qualified for flight school. Sign here. So 1969, I was able to commit to achieving my childhood dream, which again I decided in when I was in 7th grade. I wanted to be a military pilot. But fortunately for me, instead of going into the Air Force, with no disrespect to my Air Force friends, I got the chance to go into the better aviation wing, and that was the Marine Corps Air Wing.
So what kind of assignments did you have?
Initially, it was with the squadron. You leave flight school, and you go into what we call the Ready Air Group, and you would train in the aircraft that you were designated to fly in. So mine was here at Camp Pendleton, so I came to Camp Pendleton. It was at the end of Vietnam. I did not go to Vietnam, but the Marine Corps was backing out. This was now in 73, and all the aircraft that were in Marine Corps aircraft that were in Vietnam were now being reassigned to different areas around the world. And there were a large number of H-1s that went to Hawaii. So poor Aguilar got stuck having to go to Hawaii for his first 3 years assignment. So I went to Hawaii for my first assignment overseas. And then what you call unaccompanied tours. I was married. You can't take your family. So family came back to California, and then I went overseas for 1 year. And then came back to California, and very fortunate for me, I literally spent 75% of my career at Camp Pendleton. And the reason for that is the 75% of the Marine Corps H-1 inventories, Cobras and Hueys, are at Camp Pendleton. So the odds were I was going to be at Camp Pendleton. So came to Camp Pendleton in 79. Between 79 and 90, I guess 6 or 7, go overseas, come back, go overseas, come back. Went to the Gulf War, came back. But every time I was reassigned after leaving Camp Pendleton, that reassignment resulted back here at Camp Pendleton. And in fact, my staff tour, when you're a major career development and career-wise, they pull you out of the cockpit, and they normally send you to Washington or some senior staff. This was the mid-'80s for me. There was some tight budget constraints in the military at that time, so they couldn't move people far distances. So I ended up getting my staff's tour down here at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego. So in fact, one of my claims to fame is I was, I think I still am, the only aviator to be the director of the drill instructor school. There are 2 drill instructor schools, one at San Diego and one in Parris Island. So after a short assignment as an executive officer for one of the training battalions, I spent the last 2 years running the drill instructor school. Then went overseas and came back to Camp Pendleton.
So what can the public do to help your mission?
So of course, our big need right now is a continued fundraising effort. We've raised over 50% of our goals for the museum. As I mentioned, $20 million of that through a grant through the city. They've been very supportive, and we're very appreciative of that. We have raised $5 million on our own in 2 years for contributions. So our biggest need right now is to have people support our fundraising effort. We have a very robust capital fundraising campaign going on. So any opportunity people can have to donate and support us would be greatly appreciated. We have a website. They can go on our website. You can Google this, www.flyingleathernecks.org. Just Google Flying Leatherneck Museum, Flying Leathernecks, and our museum will pop up, and there is a donation page there. We accept donations, cash, of course, donations. But one of the other opportunities, especially for your older audience who may be having to pull from their IRAs, there's an opportunity to have a tax deduction, deduction made from your withdrawals that is tax deductible. In fact, I do that every year. I have to pull from my IRA, and from the very top of my RMD, required minimum withdrawal, I then just have my financial advisor take out a certain amount at my discretion and have it mailed directly to the foundation. It comes off as a tax deduction. So those are probably the 2 best ways that can help us right now. For those that maybe want to consider a legacy gift of some sort, their will or trust, there are many ways to help us along, but our biggest need right now is funding. We do have, again, we're working with contractors who do a lot of work on the restoration. We will eventually need volunteers to come help with restoration after we get the restoration well underway. And then, of course, once we open the doors to the museum, docents and other volunteers. So initially, financial support and then volunteer help would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Flying Leatherneck Historical Foundation President and CEO Brigadier General Michael J. Aguilar, for being on Impact OC. And I thank everyone for tuning in. I'm OC Talk Radio Public Affairs Director Dawn Camber. Have an impactful day.
You've been listening to Impact OC, the only program showcasing the people and organizations shaping our community. Right here on Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio.